Larry Sharpe, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for agreeing to do this. This is
well, you threatened to beat me if I didn't, so I figured, I didn't want to get a beat down, so I figured I'd show up.
Right. Well, okay, so I discovered you on Revolution One. Mm-hmm. Revolution of One podcast with my longtime friend and philosophy buddy TK Coleman.
Sure.
And I interviewed him as part of this series also, and we also did a Ravi Zacharias special on here, and and then I've been involved in Rev One, and in particular, him and I have a bi-weekly show together.
Okay.
So anyhow, so that's how I found out about you. And I was watching the interview, this interview with that he did with you, and one thing right off the bat, a perspective that you have on. You said something like, if you're more conservative and you want the government to help you. Then in basically enforcing your views, then you're a Republican.
I say that all the time, right? If you're a conservative person and you say, you know what, I think the world should be more conservative, I say, great. Do you think it's the government's job to enforce that conservative view upon the rest of the country? And if you go, yeah, you're a Republican. If you say, no, it's not the government's job, it's my job through my works, through my example, through my community to make the world a more conservative place, you're a libertarian. If you say, I'm liberal and the world should be more liberal, I'll say, great. Do you think it's the government's job to make a more liberal world? If you go, yeah, it is, absolutely, you're a Democrat. If you go, no, it's not the government's job, it's my job through my works, through my example, through my community to make the world a more liberal place, you're a libertarian. That what changes libertarian from the others is not left versus right. It's force versus conversation.
Yeah, and one criticism that I hear frequently of third parties, mm-hmm. Is, well, it's not likely that a third-party candidate's going to get in there. It's a wasted vote. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because if you're talking to a Democrat and you tell them that you're going to vote for libertarian, for instance, they say, oh, that's a vote for the Republicans. And then if you vote for if you're talking to a Republican and say you're going to vote for a libertarian, say, oh, that's a vote for the Democrats. And I always wonder, it doesn't seem like it works that way. I don't think the numbers work that way. I think it's either right. It's either for the Republicans or the Democrats, but it's not actually for either one of those.
Yeah, but see, so if you vote for Libertarian, you get 3 votes.
Right,
because your vote is for a Democrat and a vote for Republican and a vote for Libertarian. You get 3 votes. You should always vote Libertarian. See that? Easy day. So, no, I think there are 2 parts to that are important. The first one is, are you voting for the future or not? Right? People got mad at me because I didn't either jump behind Trump and say, oh, go Trump, or the reverse, get rid of Trump. I did neither. And I said, I'm going to vote for Jo Jorgensen anyway, even though I know it's a, quote, wasted vote. I knew she wasn't going to win. I knew she wasn't going to do well. I knew that. And I still voted for her anyway. Why? It was a vote for the future. And what I mean by that, say you lean right. If you lean right, you're like, this is a disaster. Biden is president. See what you did? Well, don't worry. In 4 or 8 years, a Republican will be back in charge and now your team will be in charge doing the same thing. If you're a Democrat, you go, yay, Biden's won. Yeah, but don't worry. In 4 or 8 years, your guy's going to be gone and there's going to be a Republican in charge. It doesn't matter. This keeps changing. This just swaps, but it's the same thing. Nothing changes. Every 4 years, here's what I guarantee you every time. After those 4 years are up, regardless of who's in charge, we will have less freedoms, more taxes, and the government will have more control. That I guarantee you. That's been the truth since the 40s, and it hasn't changed no matter what president you have. The only way we do it is by making actual change. So why would it matter if the Libertarian Party got 4% versus 8% versus 1%? Because if the Libertarian Party had actually gotten 5 or 8%, then that means we would have affected the election. which means now the two parties have to actually try to do something. Right now, they don't. All they do is point. And Joe Biden's campaign last year was the perfect example. Don't get me wrong, Republicans do it too. I'm just using his as the biggest example. His entire campaign was, I'm not Trump. That's what it was, right? I'm not Trump. So what about foreign policy? I'm not Trump. What about domestic policy? I'm not Trump. What about trade policy? I'm not Trump. That was his entire campaign, and it worked. Now, the Republicans do it too. They just point at the other guy and go, I'm not the evil guy. But last year, death of George Floyd. The left yells, defund the police. The right yells, back the blue. No one changes a thing. We march and scream and yell. No one changes a thing. You know who did something? There was only one Libertarian congressman, Justin Amash. Justin Amash was a Libertarian congressman last year during that entire fiasco. What did he do? He said, you know what? I don't want to yell back the blue. I don't want to yell defund the police. I want to solve a problem. So he actually put together a bill to end qualified immunity. And because he was the only one libertarian to the people's, why would you want to vote libertarian? There's only one of them. He had to cross the aisle to get, both sides to join him. And he did. He got Democrats and Republicans to join him and made the first tripartisan bill ever. And when he made that tripartisan bill, the Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, and the Republican, Mitch McConnell, refused to even see it. So someone actually made a decision to try to fix things, not to fight back and forth. And here's the best part. He crossed both sides of the aisle. If you're a Republican, you can't talk to Democrats. You get primaried. You lose your seat. You're a Democrat. You can't talk to Republicans. You get primaried. You lose your seat. You're a Libertarian. You can talk to both. You have to talk to both. How do I know that? I ran for governor in New York in 2018. There were 7,000 registered Libertarians. I got over 100,000 votes. That's a lot of Republicans and Democrats that I turned that voted for me. Yeah. Libertarians are the peacemakers. We are the only way we can actually make things work. It is through a philosophy that says you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be. Just don't force your views on others. And to be a libertarian, you must by default have policies. If you don't have policies, no one hears you. Rhetoric doesn't work when you're third party. It only works when there's only two, because then it's good versus evil. Once you have the middle, you have to have policies. So we have to solve things.
So, one of my frustrations with this two-party system, so first of all, there is no way that due to natural forces that you would have two parties that are so polar opposite, because that's not what the general public is like, right? Mm-hmm. The general public is not so black and white on issues, right? So that tells me, it gives me this indication that something's wrong. Something is wrong with that.
And that's why we have the culture war, right? Culture wars and wedge issues. And wedge issues are always culture issues. And an example I'll give you is immigration. That's a perfect example. Immigration is a wedge issue. Are you telling me they can't find a solution for immigration? I have a plan. I've had a plan for 4 years that can actually get us a secured border and vibrant immigration. Both. It's not the end of the world. You could do it and no extra taxpayer money and voluntary, and would actually make the system better. It's on loudership.com. I've already put it up there 1,000 times. It's right there if you want it. No one takes it. They don't solve it, because if they solve it, it's no longer a wedge issue, right? The most recent one was the elections, the mail-in. I came up with a plan literally 8 months ago. As soon as I saw COVID, I realized there were two issues that were both valid. You were going to have people who are going to be afraid and not want to vote, which is a valid concern. So let's find a way to have the mail-in voting, valid concern. But a second one, we've never done 30 million mail-in ballots before. There could be fraud and problems. Why would you want to test that? That's a terrible idea. Also valid. Two valid concerns, which we knew about last May. And that's when I said, why don't we now, knowing that it's 6 months to the election, why don't we now come up with companies that audit for a living, like KPMG, BDO, companies like that? Get two, not one, get two of them, so there is integrity, right? Two-person integrity.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
Have Democrats, Republicans who are concerned get together, come up with a plan that they will be able to audit everything, to be totally transparent, and they'll use at least 2 companies, either a FedEx and or Amazon, that deliver. These guys track everything. It's what they do for a living. They track these things. So professional trackers and professional auditors, 2 each, by both parties watching, you could have set that up easily within 2 months. And you would have had a fair mail-in system that both sides would have trusted. Would we do that? No. Why? Wedge issue. So we made sure that everyone be afraid, all the elections now are fraud, it's all a problem, they're fighting each other. So now if you want an investigation, you're evil, or if you don't want an investigation, you're evil, versus creating a system that actually would have solved the problem. This was another solvable problem that we purposefully didn't solve. And again, I said this publicly last May. Nobody cared.
You know, so with the media coverage, the general public knows very little about third-party candidates.
Correct.
Very little little about that. And a pretty frequent conversation or point that my wife makes, you know, when we're having our conversations about politics, and I'm saying the whole system is, you know, I don't want to use rigged because that might make me sound a certain way, but the whole system, you know, is designed to keep the same people in power.
Yes.
Because you don't have to be elected in order to be close to the reins of power, right? If you're still friends with the other folks, and if you know, you can get involved with campaigns, you can get involved think tanks, lobbyists. There's all kinds of ways that you can stay close to the power, even if you didn't win that time.
Right.
And
now more than ever, but there's a secondary piece here, and I think you're feeling it. You're in media right now with us. There is a system with fractured media where it's very hard to be a star, right? If you go back 30, 40 years, you know, there was an Arnold Schwarzenegger who was a big movie star, and he was the star, and we all knew who he was, right? That's how it worked. Nowadays, you know, actors go on TV, they're on Netflix, they're all over the place. Actors aren't really big stars anymore. Even YouTubers are localized. Who is the only group of people who cross over all media? Politicians. Yep. Politicians have become the superstars of the day. Even those who lose. Yang lost and is running for mayor. Stacey Abrams lost. She's a superstar in Georgia, right? These are people who lose and are still superstars. The idea of celebrity is the idea of running. That makes you a superstar because it crosses all media. And that's another problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And, you know, one thing that I've said about, like, especially about national elections, is if we could reform the way these debates occur so that third-party candidates could be part of the debates. Now, of course, the reason that the media probably wouldn't want that is because you can't do this sort of good versus evil sort of narrative that you were talking about before. And it's easier to market. That's not exactly the word that I want to say, or publicize.
No, it's the right word. It's totally the right word.
It's easier to, you know, this guy versus that guy. It's harder to when you have more people involved. Another thing is, I think if you had libertarian candidates, maybe somebody from the Green Party or something, if you have them on the stage, then they would have to, the Democrat and Republican would actually have to talk about actual policy.
Yes, correct. You're totally correct.
They couldn't just say that guy over there is evil.
Yes.
And that's why you want me.
Yeah, look, I know I killed a guy, but he killed 3 guys. So I'm way better, right? He killed 3 guys. I only killed 1. So you got to vote for me. I mean, you don't want a mass murderer. You just want a regular murderer, right? Come on. That's exactly what we're talking about. Completely true. But the funny thing to remember, though, is it's actually about ad revenue. Debates are actually about ad revenue. That's what it's really about, which means for us as libertarians or Green Party members, whatever the case may be, our answer is to be more popular, which is one of the reasons why you see me doing so much media. I'm trying to be more popular. People know who I am. If people know who I am, they can even hate me. But if they want to see me on a debate stage, that's how I get on a debate stage. That's how it works, right? And I was teasing, but I was also serious last year when I said, if Kanye West actually ran a real campaign, he didn't. But if he had run an actual campaign, he would have made the debates. Because you would have watched the Kanye debate. I would have too. There's no doubt I would have tuned in to watch Kanye debate. 100% I would have done it, and you would have done it too. So there's no doubt. And what happens is, let's assume that they make rules that allows for, libertarians to get in debate. And Jorgensen would have been able to get in debate last year, for sake of argument. The second that happens, here's what Donald Trump does. Oh, she's here? I'm not debating. The second she just says I'm not debating, there's no debate. Debate ends. Now, CNN says, wait a minute. I make a killing on debate night in ad revenue. I am not giving that up. So CNN says, okay, we're not going to debate. We're going to do a town hall with Trump and Biden. That's what would have happened. And they would have got their money, and that would have been it. But let's say Kanye West would have been in. And then Trump says, I'm not showing up. Kanye says, I'll debate Biden. And CNN goes, deal. So now Trump was going to go, whoa, they're going to debate without me? Trump changed his mind. Trump shows up. Right. That's why it's about ad revenue, because they're not going to show Biden and Joe Jorgensen. There's no money in that. Is there money in Biden, Kanye? Yeah, there is. And if Biden doesn't show up, they'll give Kanye an hour. Yeah, they would. How much money they make to watch Kanye answer questions? Yep, go ahead. So you do that, and now all of a sudden people show up. And if we accept that as true, we understand that if we're popular and people want to see us, they will put us on the stage. And that actually happened to me in New York State. I actually made officially the debates in New York State. I did. And Cuomo didn't show up. So they weren't televised. So I won 3 debates that nobody saw. And then they had a town hall on CBS News. So exactly what I'm talking about happened to me. That's why I know.
Yeah. So speaking of Cuomo, I regularly watch your live streams on YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
And you've been pretty critical of Cuomo.
That's true.
I think it was probably earlier this week. I think I heard you say something like, he's the worst governor in the United States.
Accurate. Yes. Yes. People always ask me, they say, Larry, why do I care about New York? I hear that all the time. You talk about New York. Why do I care? I don't live in New York. Why do I care about New York? Because New York is the battleground state. Along with California, they're the battleground states. Now, Cato marked New York as the least free state 2 times running. Take that, California. So, right, we are number 1 when it comes to being least free. So we're the worst of all of them. Whatever happens in New York is coming to your state. We're the ones who are constantly being sued to see how far our governor can push us. Our governor is always pushing executive power. That's always happening in our state. So whatever happens here, if we hold them here, we hold them on the entire country. If we don't hold them here, it's coming to your state soon.
Mm. There's he's done a lot of posturing, and patting himself on the back, how great a job he did with the pandemic, and
wrote a book and got an Emmy.
I just don't. I don't know how self-awareness. That's what comes to mind. Lack of self-awareness.
But when you're
and his brother,
when you're a narcissist, it's difficult to have that, right? You can't look at yourself. You've seen me go through his speeches. They are literally their hypocrisy. There's so much hypocrisy. I joke and I go, that's just like too much hypocrisy. Like sometimes you have like too much garlic. Like that's just, I like the taste of some nice hypocrisy. It tastes some good, but you just get too much. It starts, you just can't. He goes too far that it just leaves that bad taste in your mouth.
Okay, so give you a little bit of history on my sort of development, my where I am politically now and kind of where I came from. My dad's Democrat, been a lifelong Democrat. He worked for state government, state of Michigan. He was a high-ranking bureaucrat. He was one of the positions that usually, if there's a regime change, you're gone, because that's who they tighten their buddies up with, at those positions.
Right.
So he was in one those kinds of, that kind of position. He was able to last through a few regime changes.
Oh, that is good. He's a savvy bureaucrat. Good for him.
Yeah. And he's been retired for a long time. He's been retired for longer than I've been teaching at Ohio State, and I've been teaching at Ohio State since '04. So it's been a while. But anyhow, so that's how I grew up, and so pretty progressive, I think, in most of my in my thinking. I kind of gravitated towards Malcolm X when I was a kid. He has that kind of rebel there's that rebel vibe that you kind of.
He was a libertarian.
Yeah. And so what's ended up happening with me is I've sort of come full circle, kind of, where I started questioning a lot of the democratic policies, especially as they relate to first of all, I'm a Christian, and there's a lot of things that I disagree with, that I have an issue with, as far as certain agendas that the Democratic Party tends to embrace. One of the more damaging ones, especially for the black community and for black men in particular, is this utter embrace of feminism in all its forms. And not just espousing values and saying, hey, this is what our values are. If you like these values, come and get with us. It's the sort of trying to impose those on everyone else. So dealing with or seeing that as being a problem, and particularly an issue for the black community, looking at things like the abortion rates in the black community, where 50% of babies are aborted. 50%. They talk about the most dangerous place in America is to be an unborn baby in the womb of a black woman. Sorry to say, but this is true. And so seeing a lot of those policies and how they were not really serving or helping the black community, it caused me to start considering, well, maybe some of this Republican stuff is maybe they're not the devil. Maybe it's not terrible. But then I immediately started sort of being turned off by the sort of way that Republicans tend to kind of talk down to people of color.
Can I touch this for a second? I want to touch a couple things if I could. You gave me a lot of. If you go so far, I'm not going to touch it all. So I want to cover a couple of things.
Sure.
The first ones you just mentioned, then I'll go back to the other piece. The first one is the idea of the black community. Look, I know this. I have relatives. I'm biracial, by the way. I'm black on my father's side, and many of my black relatives are conservative, and they vote Democrat.
Right, exactly.
Right, and I tell people all the time, if you have black family, guaranteed there are people in your family who are absolutely conservative and vote Democrat. That is a common thing. And the problem with that is not that they should or shouldn't vote Democrat. That isn't the issue. The problem is almost no matter what, they vote Democrat no matter what. And when that becomes the issue, Democrats diss us because they're going to get a vote no matter what. Yes. Republicans diss us because they're not going to get a vote no matter what. So everybody disses us because we don't change our vote. If you're going to vote 90 to 95% Democrat every single election, every single time, why should anybody pay attention to you? And that's what we do. So part of this is our fault, right? I mean,
don't even make.
I'm not trying to victim blame.
We don't even make deals.
Yes.
We don't even make deals. Like everybody else gets deals.
Yep.
We don't even get a deal.
Yep.
It's like, come on, man.
Yes, it is. And that's our issue. I think Democrats would be better to us if we told them, if you don't vote, if you have to do something, we're not going to vote for you anymore. I think Republicans would be better to us if we actually voted for them once in a while. I think Libertarians would be better to us if we actually voted for them once in a while, right? Yeah. We don't do it. And then so why would they? Generally speaking, people will communicate with you the way you train them to communicate with you. That's not a 100% rule, but it's a good general rule. In this case, I think it's happened.
Yeah, so around the time I graduated college, I had started thinking more sort of libertarian, independent kind of thoughts. And, but, you know, I still voted. I think I still voted for like, I think I might have voted for George G.W. Bush once. And but then I voted for, because I was sort of dejected by G.W. Bush his first term. So the second term I voted for John Kerry. Mm-hmm. But then after that was the last time I voted for a Democrat or a Republican in a national election. I just couldn't do it anymore. I felt like I knew too much. I knew too much to continue to play that game.
I'm with you. I want to move back to the other thing you said, though, about the left and feminism.
Sure.
One of the issues that the right has is its rhetoric isn't friendly rhetoric, right? The left's rhetoric tends to be, the right's rhetoric tends to be my rights, Constitution, freedom. That's not nice sounding rhetoric. Right? The left's rhetoric is peace and equality, and it's just nice sounding rhetoric, right? The left has better rhetoric. But what the left doesn't do well is, does poorly, I should say, is it alienates people. In an attempt to be inclusive, it winds up alienating people, particularly white men. And they go out of their way to alienate white men with their rhetoric so much that alienation has sifted over into some white women and also now men of color. So you see that they've gone out of the way to, I know so many people who are white men who are like, it's like Democrats hate me. They feel alienated, right? And that's a feeling. Now, do I think the average Democrat's doing it on purpose? No, I don't. I don't think the average Democrat is like, I'm going to alienate white guys. I don't believe that at all. I think they're just trying to say, look, other people matter. And I get that. That is a warm and fuzzy feeling, and I agree with it. The worry is as you keep hammering that message home, then the white guy goes, do I get mentioned at all? Like, can I be on that list somewhere? And they feel like they're not. But there's a second piece that's been coming into our culture, and that is the idea of zero tolerance. The one strike and you're out rule, right? That type of culture that we have now makes it to where if any guy goes, what about me? Oh, you've said the wrong thing. You now must be punished forever. You combine those two and you have a very tough spot where a lot of people start feeling alienated. You know, the Trump phenomenon wasn't because Trump is the coolest and savviest guy. I mean, he's relatively savvy for what he did, but that's not the reason. The reason is there were a bunch of alienated people who were waiting to be picked up. And he said, I'll pick you up. And they said, we're in. And now that he's out of office, why does he still have power? Because no one's picked up the alienated. They just thought they'll go away. They don't just go away. They're still there. In fact, now they feel worse. That's why they're still with him. They feel worse. So, of course, they're still with him. Who's going to pick them up? The left isn't. The left calls them names. The left wants to put them in jail. The left can't pick them up. And the right is going, oh, good, we got rid of Trump. Now we can go back to our establishment stuff and go back to being neocons. So they're trying to be neocons, and they aren't picking them up either. And it's not working.
Yep. So what happened, like I said, I started to embrace more independent and kind of libertarian kind of views. And I'm going to tell you, I sort of stayed there for, some years until this pandemic.
Yes,
And
yes,
then-
and yes.
Yeah. And so what started happening to me at the beginning of the pandemic is I began reevaluating just the way I was seeing the whole black nationalism thing, which of course Malcolm X would fit in that sort of category. And so I've gone all the way from sort of progressive to progressive politically to what I consider to be like black nationalist / libertarian. And which is kind of a, I guess
Those two can exist in the same brain. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea that we as a black community are supposed to just sit around and wait for white folks to do something for us, to help us. I don't see it happening.
It doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And this is in part of this sort of transition, I think it's been influenced by a sector of YouTube called the Black Manosphere. And basically, the Black Manosphere it's basically a place online where what you used to be able to do in a barbershop or in the locker room or in a black church, you could talk through issues that were specific to black men. Those places don't really exist anymore. In fact, it seems to me that there is a concerted effort driving a wedge between black men and black women. I interviewed one of the founders of the Black Manosphere, a couple of them actually. One of them behind me here, this is O'Shea Duke Jackson, and the other one is
Isn't that Ice Cube's name?
O'Shea Duke Jackson.
Isn't he O'Shea Jackson? Isn't that Ice Cube's name?
Oh,
I think it is.
The other one is Mumia Obsidian Ali, and in our interviews, in our conversation, we talked quite a bit about this sort of disenfranchisement of black men. There's another guy in the Black Manosphere named Minister Jap, and Minister Jap frequently says that the straight, free-thinking black man is the last minority.
Straight, free-thinking black man is the last minority.
What he means is we are the only ones that are not served by any of the political agendas.
Oh, that's what he means.
Yeah. So if you look at, for instance,
How about the poor white guy? The wealthy white guy served very well. Is the poor white guy? I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. And
I think the poor white guy's not served either.
Yeah. No, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And actually in Jap's list, he lists white men as only second to black men as far as who's being least served by all of the goofy shenanigans going on these days. But
so no, what you're telling me is what you're telling me is this is another group of people who are feeling alienated.
Absolutely.
Right, who are feeling the it's funny, I've been hearing a lot of people in my world here in New York saying things like, I used to be a Democrat, but they just don't represent me anymore. I'm seeing more and more of that, but they've been raised as Democrats for decades, so they don't like Republicans. because they've been taught that Republicans are bad guys because they were Democrats for 30 years. So they don't like Republicans. So they feel politically homeless. They feel like there's no place for them. They don't like Republicans because they've been told they're bad for 30 years. And they don't like Democrats anymore because they feel like they don't represent them anymore. So they feel homeless. That's why they talk to me, because they know I'm third party. So they talk to me. That's why they talk to me. That's why I get them. So it's funny that you're saying that. You're not the first person to tell me that or to feel this way. I've heard this more than once. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting about the manosphere in general, and definitely about the black manosphere, is that for the most part, there's a lot of conservatives. It's dominated by people that are conservative.
Yep.
Libertarians, independents, folks that say that they're Republican. Matter of fact, Mumia, he's Republican. O'Shea is libertarian / black nationalist, this kind of thing. I also kind of resonate with Boyce Watkins and his whole the whole B1 thing that he's always dealing with. Black first.
Yep. I've heard B1 many times. Absolutely. Yes. I had a guest on last week on my show talking about B1 also. Yep. And that was talking about financial freedom, how to think the right way. I talk always about the idea that's going to save the black community in this country is a culture of ownership, meaning we have to own our lives, own our business, own everything, own it. That culture is going to save us, and we've lost it over the past 50 years. It's just gone away. It's been devastating.
Yeah, it's just like a handout waiting for somebody to give something to you. They're not going to give you anything. Yeah. And if they do give you something, there's definitely strings attached.
Oh, yes, there are. Lots of them. Absolutely. But we don't have that, right? It's a culture that we don't have, and I'm trying to work on that. And I speak about it often, right? I did in Queens College, I did about an hour and a half session on poverty, a speech on poverty. And it was all about the ownership mindset, changing your mindset to not having a renter's mindset, not having a month-to-month mindset, but having an ownership mindset, having a mindset, this is mine. I can work on this. I can build this. I own my life. I own my destiny. I own my company. I own my job. I own my family. I own everything. And if I own it, others don't. And if I don't do it, who's gonna?
Yep.
I own it. I got to do it. 100%.
Yeah. I was watching one of Minister Japp's live streams. It might have been yesterday, or it was yesterday or the day before yesterday. And he was talking about basically how the generation before my generation and before his generation, he was talking about how have been sort of lulled into a false sense of security by having good jobs. And the best thing that you can do with a good job is make somebody else money. Right? Make somebody else rich, make somebody else, build someone else's empire. But what seems to have been on the decline for so long in the black community is, like you said, no ownership. I mean, we don't. Absolutely. And as soon as we do own something, we're quick to sell it.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
So we can't develop that generational wealth. One thing that immigrants come in, they buy up stuff in the black community, and then they're in a 2-bedroom apartment. There's like 10 of them living in there.
Yep.
And they live like that for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, they own, the whole block.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember Killer Mike? Did you remember his series on Netflix? Did you happen to see it?
I don't think I saw that.
He talks about one thing. He does an experiment, one of his shows. And one of his shows, the experiment is, can I, in Atlanta, which is a very black city, right? Can I, in Atlanta, live for a day, only black businesses, only black-owned business? Can I do it? And he couldn't do it. It was physically impossible. And he said, my God, what have we done? Right? What have we done? And then he said something which was very controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because I hope the impact will land. He said, as bad as segregation was, at least when we were segregated, we owned our own businesses because we couldn't go to the white ones.
Oh yeah,
we couldn't go to the white ones. There had to be a black shoemaker. There had to be a black diner because we couldn't go to the white ones. So there had to be a black one no matter what. And again, please, your viewers, I'm not saying segregation should be the law. I'm not. I'm just saying that's how bad it is that we have to bring up segregation. That's the world we're in right now.
Yeah. See, the only thing worse, and this is another way to say what you just said. The only thing worse than segregation is forced integration.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, just look at the black community. That we've borne that out, because that's actually, slavery gets a lot of press, and obviously slavery is what got the whole ball rolling. Obviously, however, most of what slavery had done to damage us had been resolved and solved, because look at the marriage rate in the black community before forced integration, like 81%, higher than other places in community, right? And black-owned business, we actually had pride in what we did. We actually trusted other black people to be able to do things that we depended on. That's just not what it is now. I mean, I hate to say, but most of us do not trust black folks to do anything for us.
No,
if you want to get it done right, you got to find the white business.
I wish what you're saying was wrong. I hear it all the time. I hear it I hear like literally, going to doctors. I hear my own family say things like, no. You got to get a Jewish lawyer. I still hear that, right? And I wish I didn't. I'm not trying to be, in any way, I'm just saying I still hear that. Oh, a lawyer? No. Get a Jewish lawyer. Like, they still think that the black lawyer can't be a good lawyer.
Yep.
Right? That you don't want that. You want the Jewish lawyer, right? I'm like, wow, we still think that, and sadly, many of us still do. I think you're right. The problem is the black community as a whole. Once you move past civil rights.
Yep.
Things begin to go down. If you look at any way you measure the black family, you're right. Everything is going up. Any way you want to measure it, college, dollars, marriage rates, out of wedlock births going down. I mean, everything is in the right spot. Then civil rights comes. The problem with the civil rights wasn't civil rights. The problem was the aftermath. Right? The idea of just saying it's against the law to lynch people and to stop them from voting, that's a good thing. I'm not against that. But what actually happened after that was several things. One, forced integration. Two, war on drugs. Both of those things devastated us. The war on drugs devastated us because it put brother against brother. It literally tore up the American black family, and it took 1/3 of black fathers out of households. Then how did the actual implementation of the civil rights happen? Well, that became public assistance. And public assistance then said, oh, you want more money? Have more kids, kick the dad out. Kick the dad out, have more kids. So government created that environment. Do you think the average black woman wanted to kick her man out? Of course not. Do you think the average black woman wanted to have 5 kids? Of course not. Of course not. Mm-hmm. Right? But that's what was happening. And when I was growing up in the Bronx in the 70s, I was seeing a whole lot of that. I was seeing a whole lot of that when I was growing up in the Bronx as a kid. I tell a story once. People say things like, well, Larry, you don't understand, this and that, and people are lazy or whatever. And I said, I don't know exactly who you are right now, but here's what I'm sure of. Imagine, if you would, you had never seen your parents go to work, ever. You never saw your mother or your father go to work, ever. You never saw it. You never saw your uncle come home from work or stop by and talk about his work day. You never saw your aunt come over and talk about her work day, ever. You never saw that. Whoever you are now, you'd be a different person. And that can only happen when public assistance ensures that of being a lifestyle and encourages that. Otherwise, that can't happen. Otherwise, somebody goes off to work. Either one parent does or both. But imagine if you've never seen that. It changes everything. And if you think that I'm making any of this up or that this is not true, I'll give you the best example I can possibly give you. Have you ever watched the show My 600-Pound Life?
Yeah.
Okay. That's, for those of you who are listening who don't know, that is a show about people who weigh 600 pounds or more. The morbidly obese. There are at least 4 different shows about the morbidly obese. That's our country. People who are 600 pounds or more. People who can't get out of bed. People who can't hold jobs. How are they being fed? How are they paying their bills? That's government checks. Well, then who's feeding them? That's the government now assigning their friend as their coworker and now paying them to feed them. I'm not joking. So both people in the house are getting money from the government for that person to be 600 pounds. Am I blaming the person? No, because imagine if we didn't have that. That person physically couldn't be that big. She could not get the money to put the food into her mouth. She physically, you know how much you have to eat to weigh 600 pounds?
Yeah.
You literally, that didn't exist before. Why? The ADA, Americans with Disability Act. The Americans with Disability Act created 600-pound Americans. Prior to that, didn't exist. It didn't exist. That was created by the ADA. The government made 600-pound people become a thing in our country. It was physically impossible prior to the ADA. Now, don't get me wrong. The ADA's goal was a good goal. I get the intent behind it. I get the Civil Rights Act. I get the war on poverty. They're good intentions. The war on poverty didn't work, isn't working. The ADA didn't work, isn't working. The war on drugs didn't work, isn't working. But we don't stop any of them. Sorry, I went off track, but you see what I'm saying?
No. That was all gold. You know, one issue.
I'm sorry. I want to go back to what we talked about. The war on drugs actually made us trust each other less and less and less because we turned on each other. Yep. It forced us to turn on each other, and we did. We turned each other in, we turned on each other, and now all the violence, and I'll go one step further, all the violence that's in Chicago. We blame, the evil black people shooting each other in Chicago. You know why there's so much violence in Chicago? Because the government's too efficient. I'm not joking. In any town, generally speaking, you have 2 gangs, maybe 3, sometimes only 1. So if you have 2 gangs, you have 1 border, gang 1 and gang 2. When is there violence? When there's a border crossing, a border clash. Otherwise, there's no violence. It's business as usual. Do your job. A couple legs get broken here or there, and we just keep going. When there's border clashes, that's when there's violence. That's why most thugs want to make sure we keep in our borders and we just keep making our money and we become the thugs that we are. I got it. No worries. The government's so good, it's infiltrated all the gangs of Chicago. So as it infiltrates all the gangs of Chicago, they turn each other. Now no one trusts anybody. So there aren't 2 gangs. There's 300 families because no one trusts anybody. So now you have 300 borders and therefore 300 border clashes and therefore violence. Violence increased because of the war on drugs. No war on drugs, the violence goes away. Literally government-sponsored violence.
Yep. Speaking on this war on drugs, you know, we have, you know, this 94 crime bill. So much has been said about this because of who's our president now.
There were 150,000 cops in the black neighborhoods.
Wow.
And only paid for them for 2 years. So that once that was up, how are you going to pay for it? I don't have the money. Civil asset forfeiture. So now I'm going to start hunting in black communities, taking their money and their cash to pay my police force because I can't afford it.
Oh, great.
That's what it was. The 94 crime bill put up first 100,000, then 50,000 more cops into black and brown communities. When heroin, which our heroin was crack, our meth was crack. When crack was devastating our communities, what do we get? We got 3 strikes and you're out, just say no, mandatory minimums. That's what we got. Now it's affecting the white communities. Oh, well, now it's an addiction.
That's right.
Well, now we got to fix it. Oh, it's not his fault. Now it's a medical issue. Was it a medical issue? Well, my mother was put away. My mother was a convicted felon. Was it a medical issue then? It wasn't then. Now it is. But then it wasn't.
Yeah. Dave Chappelle, in one of his comedy routines, he says, he's talking about this whole thing and about how, basically what you just said. And then he says, to these folks that are, hooked on opiates and stuff, he says, just say no.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
It's like, yeah, that's what you told us, is just say no.
You said just say no. You said mandatory minimums. 3 strikes and you're out.
Yeah.
That's what you gave us. And the sad part is, just say no was Republicans, but mandatory minimums, that was Democrats.
Yeah.
They both decided to stab us.
Oh, yeah.
Equal opportunity backstabbers. See that?
Yeah.
There we go.
Something else that is very disappointing, that I see this all the time. And I'm realizing now that most people are very susceptible to this, and most people really kind of need this as a sort of external motivation. And that is people that look like them doing certain kinds of jobs.
Sure.
Right. So if I aspire to be president, there was a black president, so now I can be black, I can be a president, this kind of thing. I'm always kind of disappointed by that, because I've never looked outside for somebody that looks like me to sort of make me feel like I'm going to be capable of doing something. I just want to do, if I want to do this thing, I'm just going to keep working until I can do it. And if I'm not supposed to be able to do it, then I won't be able to do it. Like I said, I'm a Christian, and I believe that if I'm supposed to have something, if I work hard, keep my nose clean and all that kind of stuff, then it'll happen. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to work just as hard and try to enjoy the journey. So if it doesn't happen, then, maybe it'll happen for my son, whatever, so that kind of thing. But the black community seems to be very susceptible to symbolism.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's just
empty symbolism.
Yes. Empty. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Empty
symbolism. Now, where I think that there is some value in symbolism, the real value is in substance, right? That's the real value. So, for instance, Barack Obama as president, look what happened to the black community when he was president. Okay? So, it's a nice symbol. It's a nice thing to say, hey, we've progressed. See, this is our black president. See, you can do this too. That's great. But look at what happened. We have another sort of instance of this. Kamala being the vice president. See, look, she looks like you. But wait a minute, she was also locking brothers up like crazy.
Happily. Laughing.
Right.
Laughing. Right. Yes. Barack Obama was actually saying that legalizing cannabis was a terrible idea. Meanwhile, he was smoking it in high school. Barack Obama had the opportunity to pardon lots of people and didn't. Kamala could be right now deciding, hey, look, Joe, I put some people away. Can we start pardoning? No. I don't see them repenting for whatever supposed sins they did. I don't think they think it was a sin. I think they think they were right for what they did. I don't think they believe it was wrong, even though it was totally hypocritical. It was terrible. I'm with you 100%. I do like the symbolism. I do. And maybe it makes me I don't know, shallow, but I like the idea that we had a black president. I do. I like the idea tremendously. I don't think he was a great president. I think history will treat him as a very mediocre president, except he'll be the first black president, which will be great. But he's also not a descendant of slaves.
Right.
So he's not that either. Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, good for him. He's still black, and he still had to live through the black experience. Absolutely, he still did.
Right.
But he wasn't a descendant of slaves. So
And neither is Kamala.
Neither is Kamala. Neither of them. She's Jamaican and Indian. Neither of them are descendants of slaves. So, and many, as sad as most people don't know that.
Yep.
And they don't think there's any difference. But there is.
There's so much difference. It's ridiculous. I mean, if you look at the way that she was raised, her upbringing, it's not what we consider the black experience. It just isn't. We've still not had a president that was born from a black woman or a vice president. It's not, it doesn't.
Oh, you're right. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. And, you know, and.
Wow, you're right. Yes.
So, you know, the symbolism thing, I understand, the story about the 4-minute mile, breaking the 4-minute mile.
Yep.
And dozens and dozens of people within like the week or something, had broken had also done that once they saw it. And yeah, that's great. It's a powerful symbol, but you didn't get faster because that person broke the 4-minute mile.
Right.
You just believed you could do it. So my thing is, what is holding us back?
I'll tell you what's holding us back. And it's one of the issues that I bring up often, right? Many people who've come to this country have had issues and concerns, right? Irish when they came, Italians when they came, Jews when they came. Many of them had tons of horrible things they had to get past and deal with. Many of them did. And kudos for all of them who are able to get past those issues and concerns and moving forward and biases and prejudices they dealt with. But none of them dealt with the thing that we dealt with, which is 150 years of state-sponsored violence after slavery.
Yeah.
That's the thing we dealt with that they didn't, right?
Fact.
After, not slavery. Slavery was bad enough.
Yeah.
But I would argue that slavery isn't the worst thing that has affected us as a community. I would argue that the aftermath was actually worse.
Yep.
Because when you're a slave, there's no hope. You're a slave. There's no hope. But once you're free, now there's the hope. Oh my God, I can be like everybody else. Oh my God, it doesn't matter the color of my skin. Oh, I can be anything. No, you can't. Here's violence. I would say that's worse for the psyche because it destroys your hope. And I think that's the 150 years of violence is the difference. I want you to imagine for a moment, and I bring this up often, imagine after the 60s, there's no war on drugs. No war on drugs. Imagine if you could, no war on drugs. So we're not putting black people in jail. We're not seeing there's no gangbangers, doesn't exist. There's no gangster rap, doesn't exist. There's no black man on the TV every day doing a perp walk on cops. That's not happening. But instead, what does America see during that time period? Well, I know what I saw during that time period that was good. I saw Good Times. I saw the Jeffersons. I saw the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I saw Family Matters. I saw Cosby before he was a rapist. I saw Cosby. I saw all those things. Can you imagine if that's what America saw and not all the other things? Yep. Where the black man, the black woman would be in this country if that's all they saw? We'd be in a different place. But we didn't. What we got was state-sponsored violence through the war on drugs, kicking in our doors, 150,000 cops put into our communities, our places taken and robbed and stolen, and the black man pulled out of his family and blamed for it. Yep. The black man pulled out of his family and blamed for it. And to this day, one of the worst parts of the right now, is the way they treat the black male.
Yep.
And specifically black males in the right wing, who will never bring up the war on drugs, who will just basically say, black men, you got to be better. Black men, you got to be better. That's all they ever say. They never say, black men, you got to be better. And we probably shouldn't have taken a third of you and put you in prison.
Yep.
We probably shouldn't have done that. And then made sure that we have a system to where if you have a wife or a woman who you have 2 children with, it's best if you're not married so she can get more money. We probably shouldn't have made that. That was probably a bad idea. Sorry about that. That we never do.
So now this is where many in the sort of black nationalist sort of from that perspective would say this is why we need reparations. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with both of these points. The reality, if you care, I did a whole show on this on my Juneteenth show of last year. For those of you who know what Juneteenth is, it's June 19th. And I was surprised how many people did not know what Juneteenth was. But so if you happen to not know what Juneteenth is, it's June 19th. It's basically like a Emancipation Day, like that. And I talked exactly the entire experience of how, the black family moved from what should have happened. And if Abraham Lincoln wasn't assassinated, the 40 acres and a mule idea was a wonderful idea. The concept was, and it did not go into play, but the concept was you would take a bunch of the land away from the white slave owners. Makes sense. They were the people who were using the slave labor. They were the ones who were getting the benefits of slave labor. So you take their land and you give it to the slaves. Makes sense. The poor white guy who doesn't own slaves is not punished. He doesn't lose his land. Just the guy who actually did the dirty deed, he pays the price and loses the land. You give that then to the slaves. The idea was 40 acres, but it was whatever they thought was appropriate. And all the mules that the army was using during the Civil War, they didn't need them. There was literally 1 million of them. They didn't need all these mules, all the mule trains. They had no cars back then, right? They were using mules to move everything around. Give the mules away. The army can't afford them. Give them to the former slaves. So the slaves get a mule and then slaveholder land. Wonderful reparations. Life is good. Everybody's good. They're now rocking and rolling. And what actually happened is when many of the freed slaves heard this, they physically went back to the land and started building houses and started their lives and said, yes, we're free. Awesome. Abraham Lincoln's assassinated. Andrew Johnson comes in, says, oh, that's all garbage, sends the army in, forcibly removes all the black slaves, removes them all forcibly, makes them either become sharecroppers or executes them or just runs them off the land, and now they have to move into poverty and become sharecroppers. So destroyed everything. So no reparations. Well, the black family still decides, you know what, I got it. We are still going to try to move forward anyway. So we start moving forward by voting. So we now get into a bunch of the legislature so that we can start working. The white people say, no, that's not going to work. We're now going to make up rules to get you out of legislature. So now we can't be governed anymore. That goes away. No black people in government. The black family still is resilient and says, you know what? We're now going to create our own black Wall Streets. There were many of them. We're going to create our own worlds, our own black worlds. And we're going to start making a lot of money. Oh, you start making money? We don't like that. We are physically going to burn your stores and neighborhoods to the ground. We're going to use government forces. And the most popular one is Black Wall Street outside of Tulsa. But there were dozens of them throughout the entire country. And what usually happened, this is my point about the hope, it almost always happened right after a war. So black men fought in World War I. They came back and thought, I'm a veteran. I fought for America. I got my rights now. I got my rifle. I'm trained. I can defend myself and my community. And they built up places like Black Wall Streets all over. A lot of these were veterans. Well, the white population said, it's fine. We don't care. They can build this stuff up. And then they realized, oh, wait, they're making more money than us. Those blacks? Oh, no. Government forces come in, seize guns. Gun control is racist. Gun control was made to keep guns out of the hands of black veterans. Veterans of the Civil War, then veterans of World War I. That was the entire reason. We don't want blacks having guns because they might defend themselves, and we might want to go kill them. And this is one of the reasons why lynching was done. Lynching was always done by the biggest, most powerful black male always him. And if you don't know this, if you're hanging someone, you put the knot on the side. Then the floor falls out, the neck snaps. It's actually relatively painless. It's a relatively humane way of killing people. You snap their neck and they're dead. When you lynch them, the knot's in the back. You strangle them and you slowly pull it up. And everyone must watch that powerful black man helplessly be strangled to death. And that's your lesson. That's your lesson. See that? Try to be uppity. That didn't happen to Jews and Italians and Irish. That didn't happen. They had bad things happen to them, but not that. And then after World War II, same thing. The black man comes back, serving his country, ready to go. We're going to start building new houses. Oh, that's amazing. The federal government comes up with plans. Here's how we're going to do mortgages. And this is literally government documents. When you're building new communities, you can have 30% of the undesirables. They didn't call them that, but they literally said it. And they were either Irish, Jewish, or Italian, 30%. And that would still be okay for federal mortgages. You know how many black families you could have? Zero. None. And again, I'm not making this up. Do your own homework. If any of you think I'm making this up, that's a fact. State-sponsored violence. State-sponsored attacks. So Jews, Italians, Irish can integrate voluntarily if they wanted to. Blacks couldn't. Couldn't happen. And as we began to grow, they crushed us again. Finally, at the end, you have people like Malcolm X who are like, I'm done. You got the Black Panthers in California. We're done. We are now going to build out our own stuff with our own guns. We're going to defend ourselves. You're not burning our stuff down again. Not this time. And what did the federal government do? The FBI, again, literally assassinated, murdered all of the Black Panther leadership. And again, if any of you think I'm making this up, do your own homework. That is a fact. They went in and murdered them in their beds, shot them all to death. That didn't happen in the Jewish community, in the Italian community, Irish community. No cops went in and shot all the Irish leadership to death. That didn't happen. And that was in the 60s. It's 50 years ago. And of course, now what are we going to do? Now we'll go to war on drugs. That's the next thing. And that's been happening for the last 40 years. So all of this has been happening and crushing the black family, specifically the black male, for decades. And there's been no answer. So do I want reparations? I do, but a different way. I do not want, to your point, a check. I think that's a bad idea. Now, if you're going to do it, I'm not going to fight you, but I don't want to. Let me explain why. If we give checks out to people, here's checks, take them. I look at the lottery. People who win the lottery, over 50% are worse off.
Yep.
5 years later, right? A third actually go bankrupt. Literally go bankrupt. A third go bankrupt. So if we give a bunch of money to the black community without an ownership mindset, exactly what you talked about, my people are going to be worse off 5 years from now. A third of them are going to be bankrupt. And that's everybody. That is the black thing. That's a human thing. That is across all ethnic backgrounds. It's a human thing. So I don't want that. Not just that. People say, well, that's okay, Larry. Instead, do payments. Right? Do that instead, right? Do payments instead. Do a monthly check for 5 years or whatever. So don't give them all at once. Do payments. Absolutely. If you don't change the mindset, what are they going to do? They're going to go to those companies and the predatory lenders who say, oh, I'll give you cash up front for your annuity. That's going to happen. So they cash up front, get the annuity. The rich bankers are going to take all that money, all those payments, and then they're going to spend it the same way they would if they got it up front. Same problem. So I don't want that. What do I want? I want something I think will work. I want to, what you talked about, generational wealth. That is the problem, is generational wealth. You hit it perfectly. So I want to take a generation, 23 years, maybe 2 generations, depending upon how the deal goes. But at least 1, maybe 2. For the sake of argument, 1 year, 1 generation, 23 years. For the next 23 years in America, if you purchase any property that is 51% or more owned by a descendant of slaves, and use the same rules you use for Native Americans, we have rules for that, for Native Americans, follow the same guidelines for descendants of slaves, 51% or more, half property tax, period, no exception. Whether that property is residential, commercial, doesn't matter, half property tax. The second that happens, every big industrial guy who buys a bunch of stuff is going to start saying, "Where my black friends?" First thing he's going to say, "Where my black friends?" Because his property tax is cut in half. Now, what if you're buying a big building in New York City? That property tax is millions of dollars. Millions, tens of millions. Cut in half. If it's 51% owned, not I hire 3 black guys and put them in a mailroom, which is what happens now. Owned. Now, what does that mean? That means that a lot of black people are going to start saying, "I should stop buying stuff, shouldn't I?" But they're not going to know how to do it because many of them don't know how to make that happen. There's going to be a whole lot of white people who want to help them. But 51%. And the second that changes, tax rate goes back up. So there's never a turnaround. There's never a bait and switch. You can't bait and switch them. Because if you own 51% and I'm some white, I go, "Yeah, 51%. Then I'll buy you out till I get 51%. Tax rate goes back up. Can't do it. No bait and switch. You have to retain ownership of that for at least 23 years. And you get your tax bait the whole time. That is not forced integration. That's voluntary. If I'm some guy, some white guy who doesn't like black people and I want to keep my building and don't care, fine, pay your taxes, man. Nothing changed for you. Your life is the same. Life's the same. But this would allow that. But I'm still not done. Now also any business entity, same thing. Whatever the tax rate is across the country, half if owned 51% by descendants of slaves. So every business now is going to want to start grabbing black people to go into businesses with them. Lower their tax rates. Some won't, but then that will give a small advantage to everyone who has black ownership. Small advantage, not huge. Half tax is not a massive advantage, but it's a little bit of advantage. And of course, now the issue people tell me is, "Larry, if you do that, then the tax base goes down to raise taxes someplace else." No, we're only 13% of the population. So the percentage of the tax base that will hit will be small. But what will happen immediately? A bunch of commerce as everyone begins to change over things. So commerce will increase by default because now everyone's looking for their black friends. So commerce increases by default, which increases taxes. So we don't even lose any tax base on this because commerce increases. But I'm still not done. Anytime if you are a descendant of slave and you want to give any of your property, transfer wealth in any way to anyone in your family who is also a descendant of slaves, it is free. Regardless of fees or taxation, it is free for 23 years. So now I can transfer my wealth to whoever I want in my family, if they're descendant of slaves, for free. Doesn't matter. Whatever taxes were, they're gone. Do that for 23 years, and several things will happen. One, it's a finite time, which means now we can say it's done at one point. It's not a protected class forever, which is what we have now. It's a time. Not just that, it will now move the black family to going, "Let's get our stuff now. Let's do this. Let's start doing stuff." If the black business fails, it doesn't matter. There's another white guy who needs you around the corner. There's another Asian guy who needs you around the corner. You can actually fall and get back up and not fall and be devastated, which is what happens now. You'll get back up because they'll need you. And in fact, the failed black business owners, they're the ones who have the most experience. They're going to be the ones most in demand. They're the ones most in demand. It changes the entire mindset of the black community. But here's the best part. After 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years, do you think the non-black community is going to be happy with those tax rates? Of course not. So they're going to start lowering the tax rate anyway to match that tax rate. By the time year 23 comes by, do you think the white guy who's with you in business is going to want to pay max tax again? Hell no. He's not going to accept that. All the taxes are going to come down by the end of that 23 years because that's how humans act. So now as everyone gets a tax break in 23 years, what does America say? "Thanks, black people. You gave us a tax break. You guys are great." That's my reparations plan. Putting ownership back into the black community, putting ownership back into the black community throughout the entire country, and voluntary integration on a positive way, keeping people looking at the same prize, us all moving forward, not just one group moving forward. And if you want to be, hey, I don't like black people, you could do that, man. Stay on your side, do your thing if you want to.
That's a great plan. That's a great plan. I endorse that plan. I think that's the best plan I've heard. So I did want to ask you about your interview with Joe Rogan. So how did that get hooked up? I mean, how did he find out about you?
It was because of my policies, just like this one. I have policies for everything. I mentioned that being a third party, you have to have policies, and you do. People don't pay attention if you don't have policies. I had policies for, funding bridges and tunnels in New York City. I had policies for changing education across New York State. I had policies for so many things. He was like wowed by my actual answers to questions, right? Excuse me. New York City has a terrible MTA and MTA problem. And we have bridges that are $18 to a toll to cross. It's insane. So I said, why in the world do we have bridges named after like Mario Cuomo or whatever? It's dumb. Make it a 3M bridge, or make it a Verizon bridge, or make it a McDonald's bridge. I don't care, whatever you want to do it. Name it. Charge them $100 million per bridge per year. Will they pay that? Of course they will. They pay $20 million for a stadium that gets used on the weekends. I'm saying $10 million, $100 million for a bridge that gets crossed by 1 million people in a metro area of 16 million people that's mentioned hundreds of times in every single traffic report during the day. Not just that. Look, all the media that's shot in New York. You get product placement on your bridge and your tunnel, whatever you got. All the things on Netflix and whatever, your product placement's right there. You'll happily pay it. But you add on top of that, maintenance. So they must pay the $100 million and keep maintenance. The city still owns the asset and then still, of course, inspects it. As long as they're keeping the bridge safe, you get to keep it. You screw up, you lose your contract. Sorry, you pay up front, so your contract's gone. Thank you for the money. Next. That's how we keep doing it. Now, what does that do? That ends the need for tolls. Why do you need tolls? You're already being paid for the bridge. All the maintenance is being covered. And the money that comes from the bridge can now go to the MTA to build the MTA out. You can lower prices for the MTA. The average person is better served. These companies are spending billions of dollars every year on marketing. They're happy to put it there. They don't care where they put their money. They just want it to be effective. This is effective. They'll happily pay $100 million a year out of a multi-billion-dollar budget of marketing. They don't even care. Yep, perfect. Well done. They would do it happily. So all of a sudden, we have 12 bridges and tunnels. That's $1.2 billion you can put into the MTA. Right there. I wasn't even done, though. Then I said the MTA itself, the subway system itself in New York, at night, it's hardly run. Why aren't those freight lines? Why don't we have Home Depot, Amazon, FedEx? Bring your trains in. Less wear and tear on our bridges because less trucks in the city, which you don't want anyway, right? So wear and tear. We use them instead. Well, Larry, the tracks aren't that good. I know. They'll have to rebuild our entire system, and they would. Because it would save so much money. And on top of it, we'll name every line after that. This is the FedEx line. This is the Home Depot station. You can have the whole damn thing. We still own it. They rebuild the entire thing. We pay nothing. Maintenance becomes free. It absolutely can be done. This is not crazy. They would happily do it. When they build out buildings, very often when someone builds out a building, They immediately, the first 3 or 6 months, they don't pay any rent, whatever it is, while they build out the building to fit their needs. Same thing here, except now it's a rail system. We could upgrade the entire New York City MTA within 3 years for free. Now, that's how I got on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Now, what was your impression of Joe?
He was a good guy. I liked him. Very down to earth. If he seems down to earth, he was. Literally, I was sitting in his green room. He came a little bit late. He came in and he literally said, "Sharpe here." And I went, "Yeah, I'm here, Joe." He said, "All right, come on." We went inside. He literally said 3, 2, 1, boom. We started talking. That was it. We talked for a couple hours, and then afterwards we went outside and we shot pool. That was it. We literally shot pool, and then I left. I flew in that morning because he's in California, or wasn't. Now he's in Texas, I think. Then he was in California. I was running for governor, so I literally flew in that morning, did the show, shot pool, flew back. Literally what I did.
Yeah, he has a pretty, like his skill set is pretty interesting. He's very eclectic. He knows a lot about a lot of stuff. And he can just talk and talk in, with great detail. I mean, the variety of folks that he has on his show, it's quite incredible. And it's not like, well, I'm having such and such, which is an expert in whatever field. I don't know anything about that. No, it's like he knows something about everything. And he has these really engaging, interesting conversations.
I am trying to copy him on the Sharpe way, except mine is live, and I take actual back and forth. My show is an hour long with different people every time. I'm trying to copy him because his model's working, so I'm stealing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming through. And
absolutely.
And, yeah, appreciate your time and your energy, and you have some terrific ideas. I just hope that folks that watch this will seriously consider third party as a viable option. I think the more of us that actually consider it and actually start voting that way, and frankly, in particular, black folks, the more of us that start to vote libertarian and third party in general, I think the better off we're going to be.
Because if you vote third party, even if we lose, if we get a big enough percentage, the media must take us seriously and hear our ideas. So keep that in mind. Even if we lose, if the percentage is big enough, if we're seen to have affected the election, they will take us more seriously and they will hear our ideas. By the way, heading over to the Sharpe way, it's Sharpe with an E, or just Google Larry Sharpe. I'm all over the place.
All right. God bless you, man.
Thank you.
See ya.